to the Onyx Pathcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Eddy Webb, and with me are Dixie Cochran.
Hello.
And Matthew Dawkins.
Hello.
That's nefarious.
Hello.
Hello.
Much less nefarious.
Yeah, we've been doing this for almost a year now. I'm very much running out of my English language greetings. Oh, I've thought of a new one. Okay, that'll be coming up in a week or so.
Excellent. I'm glad the listeners have that to look forward to.
Right.
Tune in next week for Matthew's special greeting.
Sounds like a very special episode.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I don't want to do a very special episode. I've watched too many of those in the early 90s.
And then they're never good. They're never good.
No.
They're not special at all. Speaking of speciality, whatever. Dixie, what's the best word here? This is your job.
Speciousness.
There you go, perfect. Speaking of speciousness.
See, in British English, it's speciality. I always assumed in America it was specialty because of the way it's spelt. Or is it still pronounced speciality?
I think it's actually regional.
Oh.
Yeah, you can say that either way.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, because obviously there's the two I's in the English one. But yeah, no, that was just something that came to mind as we discuss the finer points.
Roll that into your special greeting next week.
In my
Your
speciality
greeting.
Yeah.
Anywho, we by the time this is going live, we'll have just wrapped up the Contagion Chronicle.
Oh, I know, I'm sad. It's done. It's over with. But that makes it sound like it was a failure. It wasn't.
No.
Yeah, we totally hit the Pestilence stretch goal last minute, which was awesome.
Yeah, all 4 horsemen have ridden into town. I'm really struggling with my language today. Marched. The horses have marched into town. That means we've got the full-size player's companion, and we are getting a big book of outbreaks as well, which will cover new manifestations of the Contagion, new parts of the world. So those will be a new couple of books to outline. But yeah, very good, very happy, and I think we broke 1,500 backers as well.
I'm not going to lie, I would have been super sad if we had only gotten 3 Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
Yeah.
I would have been like, that's not correct.
Well, for that reason, we have to give special credit to James Bell for his spacing of stretch goals, because clearly he knew that we would hit the 4th Horseman. He wouldn't have allowed for such a thing for us to miss it. Surely.
Otherwise you get like James? War, Famine, Pestilence, and Fred.
Now we're getting into Good Omens territory.
Yeah.
That's coming out soon. I forgot. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm so excited about that.
Yeah, everyone loves a bit of David Tennant.
It's true. So besides Contagion Chronicle, what are you guys working on? Dixie, what are you working on right now?
I am editing Dark Eras 2 currently, which is one of the ones that does take a lot of cross-referencing as I'm working on it, just to make sure, any book, whether it's Contagion Chronicle or something like Dark Eras, that includes all of the game lines, does require a fair amount of cross-checking. So I've been sitting here with my physical copies of a couple of the 2nd edition Chronicles books on my desk, and also PDFs open of almost all the other ones, so I can at least look at their lexicons. Or, all the ones that I need for any specific chapter. So if I'm doing a Promethean Changeling chapter, I have those 2 books to reference. Just because there are terms that are capitalized in one and not the other, or they mean something different depending on which line you're doing.
Right.
I actually reached out to Megan Fitzgerald yesterday and thanked her for having an excellent lexicon in the front of Changeling the Law 2nd edition, because I have probably looked at it 50 times in the first few chapters, because there were a lot of Changeling chapters in the first little couple there. But yeah, no, it's going a little slower than I'd like it to, but also it's a 320,000 word book. It's almost as big as Wraith 20.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'll probably be deep in Dark Eras land for another week or 2, easily. But it's a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying it. I enjoy the historical periods. Every time that I get to read about them. I did the original Dark Eras companion when the first one happened, and that was a lot of fun. So reading Dark Eras 2 is really cool too, because in the original one, a lot of the eras only had 1, maybe 2 game lines, and in this one they really made sure there were at least 2 game lines in every single chapter. So there's a lot of cool crossover stuff as well as cool historical stuff. It's very, very well researched.
So it's a lot of fun to do, but also a lot of cross-referencing, like you said.
Yeah. It's like it's fun, but it's extra work. It's like it's fun because I'm reading about King Arthur, the Seven Wonders of the World, or the Wild West, or pirates, or whatever. Like all that stuff's really cool. But it's also a lot of like, do we capitalize this in this game line? I don't remember. Let me look it up. And then going back and doing like find and replaces for something. It's like, yeah, it's editing. It's what I do.
Absolutely. And Matthew, what are you working on right now?
Currently redlining Mummy the Curse, which I may have been the last time we discussed what I was doing. Again, it's a big book, and for almost the same reasons Dixie is taking time on Dark Eras 2. There's terms in Mummy such as decree, pillar, let's see, we've got affinities, utterances, other various in-universe terms that are capitalized some places, decapitalized in other places. And I'm trying to make sure that's consistent at this point. But beyond that, of course, there's the broader material that exists in Mummy the Curse, and I recently made a video about this book on the Onyx Path YouTube channel, which got a lot of praise, not because of the video quality, but because people seem to be really excited for this edition of Mummy. I think undoubtedly first edition was divisive. It certainly felt like a game on its own. It had a strong core fan base, but never quite spread to the same reaches as games like Vampire Mage and Changeling.
Right.
And something I really want out of Mummy 2nd edition is to make it a more accessible game. I want the language to be more accessible. While the original language in terms will still be in there, I want a greater lexicon. I want there to be more you can actually do with your characters, more that you can do with your pyramid or your cult. It, of course, involves immortals now, from World of Darkness immortals. And even the judges can take avatars and start marching about the world. So I'm really happy with the way that this book is coming together just in first drafts alone. A lot of the redlining I'm doing is mostly for consistency rather than quality. And don't get me wrong, that isn't me saying that I'm sort of taking a light hand with it. It's just the writers on this have done such a fantastic job. I have to give them credit because Mummy's not an easy game to tackle for the writers or the developer. And they have really all proven that they were the team to hire. There is no one else I would have wanted on it beyond the people that are working on that book.
That sounds really
That's
exciting.
Awesome.
I can't wait for it. I cannot wait to see it. I look forward to it. So
Yay!
And as for me, I've been actually working a fair bit on Aberrant recently. We got the manuscript in a while ago, but when the Trinity errata came in, there was a couple of things that had knock-on effects for Aberrant. So I had to kind of going through the process now of talking with Danielle and talking with the Aberrant team, trying to make sure just all that stuff lines up. We had a couple things in play testing as well that weren't quite working out, so we're adjusting based on the playtest data. And also, we decided that we're going to do something different with the fiction. I can't go into too much detail about that, but it does involve me learning how to write comic book scripts. So that's got an interesting challenge. It's just learning, writing a different way that I'm not used to. I'm enjoying it, but it is a bit unusual.
That's fun, though. It's always fun to try a new style.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's exciting to kind of learn it. And also, luckily, I have a few friends that are comic book writers, so I was able to kind of chat with them and say, hey, how does one do this? And get some advice and suggestions. So it's been really cool. We'll see how it goes. And speaking of things that are new and interesting, we decided today we wanted to kind of do another deep dive episode, and we talk about Scarred Lands.
Scarred Lands.
And this is an interesting one because it's not one that any of us are super familiar with initially. So we all kind of learned about this relatively recently. But it's definitely a game with a bit of interesting history that goes with it. It's originally was a D&D 3.0 system. And our current version, we now have a Pathfinder first edition, which is kind of a derivation of 3.5 D&D. And then we have a D&D 5th edition version. For the purposes of this, we're going to talk primarily about 5th edition. So if we're going to use 5th edition language, it's one that we're all kind of generally familiar with.
Also, like, all the setting is the same across both editions. It's just the crunch that is different.
Right. So, but we occasionally use throw terminology out here and there. We're probably going to default to D&D 5th edition terminology.
Oh, yeah.
Not that all of our Pathfinder fans, just what the three of us are more familiar with. But it's interesting because this was originally a White Wolf setting, but as opposed to a lot of the other White Wolf licenses where we actually license it from the current owners of White Wolf, this is actually something that Onyx Path owns. It was originally co-owned with Nocturnal Studios. Nocturnal Media, my apology. It was kind of a joint thing, but then the owner of Nocturnal, Stu Wick, passed away. And so after some discussion, Onyx Path went ahead and acquired all of it. So there was a Kickstarter in the middle that, we had the results. So Scarlands has been on our radar for a while, but it's only been recently we've been able to kind of really focus on it and start figuring out what we want to do with it and really take it to the next level where we want to go with everything. So it is kind of an interesting history. And one of the things I learned when I was looking into this was that part of the conceit of Scarred Lands was it was meant to explain away some of the idiosyncrasies of Dungeons and Dragons. A lot of D&D worlds are fantasy worlds that kind of then get attached to the D&D system. But this is a kind of way of doing it the reverse. So it was like, why can't spellcasters wear armor? Well, in Scarred Lands, one of the options is you get this, all magic is cursed, and one of the potential curses for that is that you heat up when you cast spells. So it's too hot to wear armor. So that's why you can't wear armor in Scarred Lands.
Because you'll cook yourself.
Right.
You don't want to do that.
Exactly. And, cooked spellcaster is bad. You want to go for more of a cooked paladin. It's leaner meat, I find. So I'm curious, before we kind of dive into details, what kinds of things do each of you like at a high level about the Scarred Lands? Dixie, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think that the history of the setting is really cool. The Titan War and Titan Spawn, all that happening, because it is kind of a fantasy post-apocalyptic setting. I've seen it described online as grim and bright as opposed to grimdark.
Oh, interesting.
Where it is still that fantasy heroic setting, but it has this background of the world is pretty screwed up because of the Titan War still. And the, there are reasons for everything, as you said. Like, the reason that the elves are kind of dying out is because they killed a primordial, I think, or a titan, one of the two, which is something that you're like not supposed to do.
Right.
Yeah.
So their race is screwed up. I also like a lot of the different races, and I like how in this edition they brought some of the races that were previously villain races and allowed them to be playable as well.
The redeemed,
really cool. Yeah, so like the Asathi and the Centaur people. I'm not good at all the names. I'm so sorry. I edited this like 8 years ago.
Yeah,
Iron Bread. Yeah.
Also, it wasn't 8 years ago. It was like 3 years ago, but I don't remember all of it.
It's fair enough.
But it's a really, really, really cool. Just I don't know. I just like the difference from your typical fantasy setting. It's not like you're an elf or a dwarf or a human or a halfling or an orc. Like, it's got some interesting and different things you can play, and also interesting classes you can play.
Totally. And we'll go into a little bit about that, because I think there is some really interesting options that worth kind of highlighting.
Yeah.
But Matthew, what kinds of things do you really gravitate to in the Scarred Lands?
Well, I've waxed about it before, but I mean, to start, much along the same lines as Dixie, I'm a big fan of the Skarn-specific races, such as the Asathi, who are serpent folk, the Slytherin, who are rat folk, and I know Rich Thomas, our creative director, is a big fan of ratkin in pretty much every game he can get hold of them.
Although he did say that if he had known about Harry Potter, he would have named them something besides Slytherin. Or they would have been named something besides Slytherin.
Right.
Yeah.
If Harry Potter had existed when it was created, but it didn't.
Yeah, if I remember, and I may be completely wrong here, but I'm fairly certain that with 3rd edition Scarred Lands, they were just Slytherin, and that's all they were ever called. Come the newest Player's Guide, which is available for 5th edition and Pathfinder, they are subnamed as Rat Folk and often referred to such throughout the book, I think, because whether we like it or not, people are going to immediately draw the connotation to House Slytherin.
Yep.
And, it's a good word. But another race that you very rarely see in Scarred Lands receive a lot of players, the Manticora, and I'm a big fan of them.
Yeah, they're cool.
And tend to be rather evil and brutish, as Manticores often seem to be in D&D. But I'm a big fan of any kind of lion-like creature. But beyond the races, I think the setting itself and the scope of it. I think one of you mentioned the word grandeur, and that speaks to the heart of the matter for me, because I am a big fan of the idea that this is only just over a century since the gods and the Titans had their war, the sort of Titans War. And as you pointed out, Dixie, you can't just kill a Titan without severe repercussions. So there are Titans littering the world in various forms because they are all imprisoned, bound, dismembered, but kept in a form of stasis. And so they're poisoning the world around them. Titans aren't necessarily evil. In fact, in D&D and Pathfinder terms, they go without alignment because they're more primordial or elemental.
Right.
But because of how strongly they identify with their respective, I guess, portfolio, they poison the world around them, which is why you have a sea which is literally blood. It's why, depending on the Titan that has fallen in this particular place, everyone around him may be consumed by avarice, because this Titan was particularly strongly associated with wealth or the accumulation of power. And I am a big fan of the environment being a large part of the setting, in any setting. You mentioned, Eddie, how a lot of the time a fantasy setting is just something that's constructed to, I guess, latch on to D&D or vice versa. Right. But Scarred Lands is very much about that setting. The setting is alive with possibilities of adventure, of interesting characters. The example I always use is you can venture into a castle that is the fossilized leg of a dismembered Titan. So the inhabitants are all extensions of that Titan's comatose will. And depending on the kind of Titan it was, you're going to be adventuring, fighting against monsters of radically different types, depending on where your GM wants to take you. But yeah, I think the setting of Skarn is incredibly inspired. I love it.
Yeah, I think.
And honestly,
go ahead. Oh, okay, I'll talk. Well, I've seen it said online too that like one cool thing about Scarred Lands is that the land itself is kind of an NPC because it is so like important to whatever you're doing, whatever the campaign is. Like where you are really matters. I just last summer, I guess, edited the Vigilant novel for Scarred Lands, and you really see a lot of it in there, based on the castle they're protecting, the like fort they are working out of, versus the swamps, versus later on when they go to a different region, like how much the region impacts what's going on in the lives of the characters, and also in, you know, how they fight, how they do things, what they have to do to survive, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, I added on to that, is that it reminds me a lot of Matthew's kind of admonishment to his writers, like every setting should have a story hook. The whole setting feels like it's just nothing but story hooks. For all the stuff you guys have talked about, it's like, you know, there's not generic magic items, there's not generic dungeons. Everything seems like it's just seeped in this backstory and history and cool culture. I mean, you know, one of the seas is actually just a sea of blood because the Titan was bound underneath of it and was wounds never healed. So it just keeps pumping blood into the ocean and the sea. And so it's just a constant blood ocean of red.
It's fantastically evocative, isn't it?
It is, and so for a post-apocalyptic game to work, you have to get a sense of what came before. You have to have a sense that there was a society here that has since been destroyed. Mm-hmm. And for post-apoc set in our world, that's very simple because we recognize our own world. So in a fantasy game, it's always harder, unless it's a recognizable fantasy world, like certain like the Forgotten Realms had their post-apoc version at one point. So this is. You have to get that. You have to really evoke what that old setting had to feel like to feel what the new version feels like, and so you really do feel like these lands are scarred in a very literal sense. That there was something beautiful here and now it's gone, or it's not as good as it once was. So that's really, I personally just really love that.
Yeah,
and you both mentioned. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it extends into the monsters and the races, looping back to them. That some of those races, like the Asathi and the Slytherin, as just two examples, I think there's 4 different races that were Titan spawned during the war and prior to it.
There are 6.
Okay.
Asathi, Hollow Legionnaires, Manticoras, Slytherins, the Ironbred Sutaks, and Orcs.
I didn't know they were all Titan spawn, but I know that the ones that are playable are essentially redeemed, if you like, in the sense that they agreed to stop fighting resolutely for their Titan masters and mistresses. It doesn't mean that they don't do it on the quiet or have secret shrines, but it means you've got this uneasy politics state between the races that predominantly fought on the sides of the gods, such as the humans, the elves and dwarves, and the arguably new races of the Asathi, Manticora, and so on. And it pushes, for me, the Scarred Lands setting of Skarn closer to Planescape and Numenera, in fact. Numenera has a lot of similarities to Scarred Lands, in fact, in that post-apocalyptic, mysterious sense, although it's far, far removed from the event that made it such.
Right.
When compared to Faerun in the Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk in the Earth setting, which are more traditional in the sense of Forgotten Realms, of course, is incredibly high magic, but they've got more Tolkien-esque roots. This setting is quite distant from that, to my mind.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing, something you actually digressed the way I was going to digress too. But one thing we kind of skipped over, we talked about the races, but one of the cool ones I think shows that sense of history is the Hollow Legionnaires, which are basically just ghosts bound in a suit of armor, and you get to play one of those. And they're relatively recent to the modern day of the setting. So it's like these things have just come around the past few years. They started to organize themselves because they were raised for a war that kind of never happened. And so now they're trying to find their way in the world, but they're inclined to adventure because that's what they were in real life, they were adventurers or soldiers or whatnot. So this is, again, the sense of touching on what came before that's actually baked right into the player characters. I just really, really dig.
Yeah.
And also, it kind of goes into the classes as well. All of the classes that are available in 5e have some kind of a tweak or modification. Barbarians get primal paths, including a shaman spellcaster. Bards get colleges. Clerics get divine domains, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of them that give you something to go with. Like Rangers, their big one is that you can take Titan Spawn as the favorite enemy to kind of reflect that post-war mentality. But what's interesting is paladins. There's only one kind of paladin, the Oath of Adamant. You serve the god of duty and honor. There aren't really a ton of paladins of other gods, but that concept, those paladins are so entrenched in society, they actually have sub-orders, gold, iron, mithril, and silver, to show that there's a depth and a texture to. So even though it only focuses on one god as opposed to being a paladin of any god, they then deeper into what it is to serve Korean and how they different ways you can approach serving as one god. There's a level of depth to one god worship in a polytheistic fantasy that I just hadn't really seen much before.
I think until you said that, I kind of forgot that the paladins have the same 4 medals as their different things as the Hollow Legionnaires do. in the new edition. Because they can be reborn at like the Mithril Spire, the Gold Spire, or whatever, and they all have different, kind of ways they behave based on that. That's kind of how we like sub-raced out the Hollow Legionnaires. Kind of like how there are different kinds of dwarves or different kinds of elves or whatever. There's different kinds of Hollow Legionnaires. Right. And they even like bleed that kind of metal if they bleed and stuff, and it's just really cool. But I definitely forgot that it kind of like was with like the same breakdown as the Paladins.
And that's one of the things I think is really cool about the Scarlands is that there are these little kind of small connections you can make. Oh, that ties to that, and that shows the thing. It's really cool.
Yeah, sorcerers have a similar thing. I know for a fact in the Pathfinder setting, I've not got any sorcerers in my current game of Scarlands for D&D, so I'd have to double check. But I know in the Pathfinder version with sorcerers' bloodlines and destinies and the like, those are often tied to the Titans. So you have a class that is linked by heritage to one of these Titans that is now fallen. So you're automatically divided as a sorcerer between your bloodline and what I guess society expects of you, which is nice because it means it affects you both at a class and a race level. Nothing in this setting feels like it's just ad hoc. That you're just, jamming it into the setting. It's all been layered pretty nicely, and that's definitely something I appreciate.
Yeah, and even on a higher level, we talked about it, but magic users have their own different kind of approaches. It's not just fire and forget, reload your spells, whatever class you belong to. There's Mesos' Bane, which is that basically after Titan War. Spellcasting doesn't quite work right. It's a little vague on whether magic is actually fading or not. It definitely seems like it is a lower magic setting than something like a Forgotten Realms, for example, because they're trying to shoot for more of the pulp Conan style level of magic. But part of the reason why magic users are a little rarer is because there's a backfire. And in the new edition, it's if you cast magic, you choose whether it's you radiate heat, you radiate light, or you radiate lightning. All of which means that either it's hard to wear armor, but also you're going to attract attention. You can't really subtly cast spells. Everyone's going to know you're the spellcaster. And that is an interesting, that will change. And a different dynamic is like now, if you're in a conflict, people can see who the spellcaster is very easily. They can try to target that person if they want to. There's a bit of a backlash to casting spells. It doesn't. I hate the term of balance because I largely think balance in RPGs is arbitrary, but it does, from a tactical standpoint, from a setting standpoint, feel like magic users have a different approach than they do in more traditional Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, I haven't played Scarlands, but I mean, when I have played, casters and D&D in general, yeah, generally a fight breaks out, you back up and kind of subtly cast your spells from, way behind all the fighters as best you can. But much like in online role-playing games that I played, people are going to try to kill the casters first. Like in any kind of PvP, like people are going to try to kill the healer first. And if you are telegraphing that you're the healer, that makes it even harder. So yeah, that's certainly very interesting, and I like the dynamic that gives.
But yeah, isn't it a bit sad, I guess, when the magic goes out of magic in a setting? That I do appreciate, again, in this setting, and not just this setting, we've dealt with a few where magic is something to be revered or feared. And Pugmire, Monarchies of Mao is the same. Obviously, both mage games are very much like this too, where the use of magic is something that is often seen as unnatural or dangerous. You're dabbling with elements you do not quite understand. And so where you're playing a generic fantasy game and throwing out a fireball and no one bats an eyelid who's on your team, it's kind of, to my mind, the enemies you're fighting, when they see a ball of fire rolling towards them, that's the point you break and run. You don't keep fighting because this person could incinerate you. That's not a way anyone wants to go.
Right.
But in Scarred Lands, that feeling of the wonderment of magic and the danger of it, the horror of violence exists in this setting. And I think it's because, again, everyone is still picking themselves up after a war. They're still picking through the ruins, and most dungeon crawls are basically archaeology digs.
Yeah.
You are trying to find out about your history, again, not dissimilar to Pugmire. And yet, in this case, there's very much a punishment for digging too deep. There's a lot of curses involved in this world with the magic items you might pick up and the creatures with whom you might consort, and the monsters that appear in those creature collections for Scarred Lands are some of the most inspired, I think, in any fantasy setting.
Actually, yeah, let's jump to those, because the monsters, or the kind of collective Titan spawn, if you will. A lot of people have gravitated to some of the Scarred Lands specific ones. I know a general favorite are the spider-eyed goblins, which are basically they're a lot like goblins in kind of a classic D&D setting, but they have all sorts of eyes all over their face, and they're a little more feral, I guess, for lack of a better term. But just visually they're very evocative, and I think even the spider goblins were in the novel. Right, Dixie? No, that's fine. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't think so, but mostly because the main enemies are the Slytherin in that one. Maybe in the other novels.
Right.
Maybe
in
like the Richard Lee Byers novels.
I think it's what I'm thinking of. You're right, because I've been binge reading recently, so it is blurred together a little bit.
Oh, that happens to me all the time. I'm like, what plot boy was in which book? I don't know.
But there's also really interesting spins on D&D monsters. And one of my favorites, actually, is the Hornsaw. Because it's a unicorn, but it's been corrupted by what's been going on. So now it actually has like just a giant saw on its head. And it's like, oh my God, you made unicorns super creepy and scary. And that's amazing.
I'm a fan of the Hornsaws. They are fun.
They're super, super cool. But also, the other thing I like about the Scarred Lands is that it thinks through the ramifications of these things. Like we talked about the fact that magic can corrupt you, magic can backfire, magic can draw attention. And so the setting actually has an answer for a way to resolve that, which is magical tattoos. And there's actually an entire class of tattoo adept that uses tattoo magic, but also just as an item, you can basically, it's functionally a permanent wear magic item. So like instead of having a collar that gives you giant strength, you actually just get a tattoo around your neck, and then that actually has the magic item embedded in, and it adds more. I think your character's body actually ends up telling a story of all the stuff you've accomplished, all the things you've acquired, and it's just a cool visual of being able to touch a tattoo and having it glow and do a magical thing. And then like the tattoo adept is a prestige class that you can actually hold spells into your body, as opposed to having you kind of cast them when Bitness's Kurt Bane is like in a moment you just lock them into your tattoos and then release them later.
Right.
It's an interesting way of doing quote unquote spell book economy, because you only have X number of spells available to you, but you can kind of it's just a more visually interesting way of doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, even if you want to just talk about kind of the not fantasy parts of the world, or I mean, it's all fantasy, but the ones that seem a little bit more mundane, I think that even all of the like city-states and countries and politics that go on in the setting are really, really well done as well. There's the Calastian hegemony that rules a whole bunch of things, but then there's also an area called New Veneer. There's what's the one where the halflings live? I can't remember.
Yeah.
But there are just like all these different, like whether they're duchies or hegemonies or empires or whatever, there's a lot of power consolidation going on in the wake of the war, which is a thing that happens in the wake of war. Yep. Since everything got kind of upended. So you also see that struggle. it's actually detailed fairly well in the Vigilant novel, which is cool. They talk a little bit about the tensions between some of the different countries, but it's also really well detailed in the regular core book. So if you want to, yes, you can do a campaign where you're running around in the forest, never seeing other civilizations, killing Hornsaws and fighting Slytherin and what have you. You can also run a campaign where you're, spies for one of the countries, or you're based mostly in a city, which I think is a really nice, well-rounded setting. Because I feel like some settings lend themselves more to politics and some don't.
Yeah.
And I think this one lends itself equally to politics and adventure, which is super cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a setting that rewards you for dabbling a little in both in your campaigns, because if you spend a little too long out in the wilderness, you're almost certain to die. It's quite unforgiving.
Right.
And yeah, people who live in the wild in Skarn tend to be pretty corrupt all by themselves, or they've made deals with something pretty dire to be able to exist out there away from the safety of one of their city states. But like you say, I think it's the country of Gelspad, isn't it?
It's the continent of Gelspad.
The continent. My apologies. That is the home setting for Scarred Lands. Is incredibly varied. There's a lot you can play with just in that area alone, but one of my favourite settings, we've not done anything with it yet for this edition. I hope that we'll see books that do cover it, is Termana, which is the tropical setting. Which
is the other continent. Well, there's like 4 or 5 continents total.
Yeah.
But Termana is the one that kind of turns typical fantasy on its head even a little more.
Yeah, it's got all kinds of weird carnival-like aspects. So in fact, there's the blood bio is I guess the central element of Termana, which is this horribly hot, sometimes storm-like, basically every aspect of tropical environment you would expect. It's a place that is unforgiving to adventure in, but the rewards for doing so can be fantastic. And although that this isn't a promotion on behalf of Onyx Path by any means, because the Creature Collection 3, which was originally released by White Wolf, and the Termana setting, which were originally released by White Wolf, are just fantastic reads. And I guess they came out about 15, 20, maybe even 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
No, probably about 15 years ago. And I remember when I bought them and just absolutely taking ideas from them for my own game, which I wasn't running in Scarred Lands. I was just surprising the players in our Forgotten Realms game by throwing all these awful creatures and environmental features that had appeared from Scarred Lands.
Well, so yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No. I think I'm done.
Well, what I like about the continents, at least as they were presented in the 3rd edition, or 3.0 edition, is that you've got Gelspad, which is where the Divine War actually happened. So that is where we've got our Titan spawn hanging out still, and Titans everywhere. It's kind of the more traditional fantasy of the continents. Like it's mostly ruled by humans. It's pseudo-European, all that stuff that you kind of expect from a fantasy setting. But that is the closest it gets to Tolkien-esque, is just those 2 things. But then Termana is not only tropical, which you don't see as often, but it's also where the demi-human races are in charge, as opposed to the humans, which is super cool. And the gods and the Titans have a lot less impact in Termana, just because it's a different continent. Like, I keep thinking about it in like Game of Thrones terms, like Westeros versus Essos, where like everybody in Westeros is obsessed with this thing that's happening, and a lot of people in Essos are like, shrug.
Whatevs.
No, it's a good comparison.
Yeah,
it's definitely got an alien feel to it.
Yeah, and then there are 3 smaller continents that were presented all together in one book as kind of like extra settings. So there's Asherak, which is like desert. That's where the gods were born. There's a lot more demigods there. There's a lot of stuff happening there. That's also a very unforgiving climate because it's entirely desert, pretty much. There's a place called the Dragonlands, which is where dragons live and their worshippers.
Nice.
And then there's Finrilic, I think, which is like Arctic Termana that has more people that worship the Titans. So it does have a lot of really cool places you can explore, and you really could do like an entire Asherak campaign if you wanted, or entire Termana campaign. Like, you don't have to play in Gelspad.
Yeah.
That's just what we presented in the core book. So you get a lot of Gelspad. But if we do more of this, which I would love to, I want to do a Termata book so bad.
Totally. And also, I mean, that one of the things I like about all these different settings is that you don't often get the generic lawful good city or the generic evil city. One of my personal favorites is Hollowfaust.
Yes.
It's an entire city of necromancers. It's not evil. It's just they have built an entire economy around raising the dead as their servant class. And they have some very valid arguments about it's like, hey, we don't have slavery because they're already dead. No one's using them.
Unlike in a lot of the rest of Gelspad, it must be said.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, slavery is a thing in certain parts of specifically in the classic hegemony. And Hollowfaust is kind of an independent city. It just said, no, we found a different way of approaching those same problems. And also it's like, none of y'all understand what we do, so we're going to go over here by ourselves and study the dead in quiet and just kind of be left alone. And there's, of course, intrigue and politics between the different necromantic groups and whatnot. So I love the fact that there's everything has a kind of an approachable vector where you kind of go, oh, okay, this is a necromancer city. Oh, hey, this is where the halflings live, whatever. But then once you get in, things get really potentially nuanced and complicated inside of it. So you can go as deep as you want to in a lot of these spaces. There's no kind of just, oh, this is just a city. Everything seems like it has some hidden secrets or backstory or intriguing characters just around the corner. You always feel like there's always something around every dot on the map, as it were.
I'm a big fan of the Asathi city, the Jeweled City. Partially because of where it's located. Like, it's just in the middle of a swamp. But it's described, like, it's called the Jeweled City for a reason. Like the cobblestone streets have jewels embedded in them. Everything has jewels embedded in it. It glitters in the sun. They're totally fine with visitors, but, like, it's in the middle of the swamp. Like, so you have to go through the swamp. And then suddenly there's this beautiful city that, like, has these gorgeous gardens and orchards, and there are bridges, and there's, like, no litter. Like, it's this perfect, beautiful city in the middle of a swamp. And I've always thought that would be really fun to just have your players, like, run across. Like, they've been traveling through the swamp, like, fighting things, and they're tired and they're dirty, and then they're like, we're too dirty to walk on these streets. Like, we need to go take a bath. Like,
yeah, they would definitely think it's a mirage or a trap of some kind, I think.
Right.
But no, it's just the fairly friendly Asathi city. Just hanging out.
And I mean, kind of the last point is something that Matthew kind of alluded to, is that because this was originally put together, it was a setting that was kind of implied through some of the initial books, and then eventually became a full-fledged setting. So it's not. It allows you to pull pieces out and put them into other D&D games. There's tons of inspiration to use in any D&D game, which is great, but it doesn't feel piecemeal. It doesn't feel like, oh, here's like I said, you mentioned there's a desert continent, but also there's a logical reason why desert continent exists on Skarn. It's not just, okay, and here's a desert world. Here's fantasy Asia, here's generic Middle Eastern area. No, there's actually a reason why each of these places exists, but there are also compartmentalized enough that if you want to just have a cool necromancer city in the middle of your D&D game, you just plop Hollowfaust in, change a few things, and just run with it. So it's really, even if you're not going to play a game set in the Scarred Lands, there are other, we have Wise and the Wicked, which is actually our book of characters. It's not actually a monster manual. It's just, here's a whole bunch of interesting characters. And if you're playing a Scarred Lands game, all those characters are going to be recognizable and noteworthy, and you can, oh, that's that guy, and now I have the stats for him and how I can use him. But if not, it's just a ton of really interesting characters you can put into most any D&D game and run with it.
I mean, one of the most distinctive villains, monsters in Scarred Lands is the Fire Rack Dragon. All of the dragons, to be honest. But because they are the former generals of the Titans' armies, and so there are theoretically not that many left, certainly not that many that are active. And so you have Fire Rack Dragons, Storm Rack Dragons, and various other. And as well as being dragons that breathe whatever element they're associated with, or environmental force, they seethe with it. They emit, like the Fire Rack Dragons, emit noxious fumes that from between their scales. Even standing beside one is enough to blister your skin. that they can pretty much spew up lava as well as great gouts of flame. So it really helps to make traditional monsters a little more colourful than they are, or to defy expectation. One of my favourites is the Flesh Corruptor, which is in the player's guide for Scarred Lands, which, as I say, you can get for Pathfinder or D&D 5. But the description of it is, this pitiful humanoid creature is a walking mass of decay. Oozing sores and seeping wounds run rampant across its exposed flesh. And great yellowish blisters cover its hands and feet. Its hunched posture and cowl hide its face, and much of its body is concealed by leper's rags and tattered robes. Now this awful walking mulch is basically a walking disease vector. Nice tie into Contagion Chronicle there. And in Pathfinder terms, it's for a third level party. So in theory, it isn't that strong. But one of its abilities is a flesh corrupting disease, where you make your Constitution save or Fortitude save, depending on the game. And if you are slain by this magical disease, it's described as a creature slain by this magical disease decomposes at an unnaturally accelerated rate until nothing but a bubbling pool of putrefied muck remains after so many minutes. And the
well, I was hungry.
Now I am. But the fact that this is a low-level creature, and often in a game of D&D or something like that, you'd have a creature like that acting maybe in solitude as some kind of pernicious threat. There's a corrupted creature around here that could disease you. Imagine being trapped in a small room and there's multiple of these things. Instead of your normal animated dead, instead of just your zombies and your skeletons hammering at the windows and doors, you've got these flesh corruptors that are trying to get in, and any one of them could give you this disease that would just make your flesh slough off. And despite the fact they're relatively weak, it's horrifying. It's wonderful to put big burly fighters and rangers and paladins and know-it-all wizards and clerics in a situation where they're not afraid for losing hit points. They're not afraid of the spells this creature might cast. They're afraid of the disease that they might get just by getting into a fight with these creatures. And so I find this game makes you think differently about the monsters.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the flavor kind of, we talked about this a little bit, but like it goes through the whole setting. I actually wrote on the original player's guide, and it was an interesting assignment because I was asked to do the spells, but I didn't do the mechanics for the spells. I just wrote the flavor for all the spells, which is an assignment I've never gotten before. But Scott Holden, who was the person who put this together, really wanted to make sure that each of the spells, like going, this spell was used in this campaign during a Titan War, or this spell evolved as a result of the hegemony's approach to this area, or this spell is often used by this group because it helps them to raise settlements in areas where they're overcome with plague. Each of the spells feels like it came from somewhere, or it belongs somewhere, or it's a part of something. And it was a really interesting assignment. And looking back on it now, because I've long since forgotten what I wrote, and was like, oh, hey, this is really cool. Hey, I think I wrote that part. I'd forgotten. But it was nice to kind of just go through a spell list and get like an idea of how these spells are actually used by the NPCs in the setting. And it opens, like you say, it opens up your minds for different ways you can do them maybe you hadn't thought of before, because there's all this texture and backstory that goes with them. So taking existing monsters or existing spells and putting spins on them really makes you re-examine what you can do in a setting. So it's really great that there's these books that incentivize and really make a big deal out of all these possibilities.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
yes.
Completely.
I love it when. Well, so I'm too, like I've talked about this before in like fantasy novels and stuff. I'm super into world building, and I definitely prefer a well built world with history. Like I'm a big Brandon Sanderson fan for that reason. Particularly the Way of Kings, the whole Stormlight archive, but also the Mistborn series and everything, because it's such an interesting world that he's built, and all the magic makes sense and it all has a purpose. And it's nice hearing that goes into, games too, just in general, but particularly into this setting, is that people really did think about the world and about how things would interact with the world when they were building the setting. It just makes it easier to immerse yourself into it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's super cool.
It's actually one of the problems I have, conversely, with video games like Final Fantasy, and with the setting of Middle-earth. I mean, just to go off on one for a couple of minutes, I really struggle with settings where you have a city placed in the middle of bloody wilderness for hundreds of miles around, and there's a single road that leads there. I remember shouting and being told off in the cinema, quite rightly, when watching Return of the King and the lighting of the beacons occurred. I think I shouted, "What? Someone's been sat up that mountain for 300 fucking years waiting for a torch to be lit a couple of miles away," because
but it looks good on the screen, Matthew.
My arse that had been sat in that cinema seat for 2.5 hours by that point disagreed. But the fact that Scarred Lands, and I extend this to Faerun as well, I very much enjoy. I get a hell of a lot out of a setting that makes sense. It has infrastructure, it has geopolitics. There's a reason this nation is warring with this nation, and like you say, there's a reason magic works the way it does. One of those elements that is particularly striking for me with Scarred Lands, and again, it happens a bit in Forgotten Realms too, is how everyone reveres in some way every single deity. Even though there are some deities that are absolutely abominable. I think I'm thinking of, is it Charduk, or Charduk, who is the god? God of slavery, war, all kinds of nasty things. But if you're going into battle, you will say a prayer to him, because you want him to be on your side. You want death to your opponents. And I think because slavery is such a formed part of the hegemony's culture, there's a lot of people there who may be of good alignment, who pray to him predominantly. And so, because the characters in this setting have got many aspects to their lives, they all revere, this household deity for that wilderness deity for this, and I just think it makes the world a lot more colourful.
Totally.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that, because you're right. A lot of classic D&D is you have this kind of pockets of monotheism in a polytheistic society. So it's like there's 20 gods, but I only worship this one. Whereas you're right, Scarred Lands takes a much more sensible approach of like, well, if there's 20 gods, we're going to probably worship all of them based on situation. And there's certain ones that you're right, maybe you prefer, but like, the paladins are going to serve Corian, but they don't necessarily only pray to Corian. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic. So yeah, again, I think just the thought through really helps you feel like, oh, there's what happens if it gets you the what if game. It's like, okay, well, if this is true and you thought this through, then what happens if these pieces connect together? What happens if this society meets that society? What happens if this organization goes that? And that's you start to play the mental what could happen there, and that's what I think draws you into a setting. If you start to go, well, but if I this, but if that, if you play that what if game, that's what really gets you to immerse yourself into a setting. So thank you so much for doing this. If you guys are interested in Scarred Lands, the new editions of the Player's Guide and Wise and the Wicked, as well as the Spiragos Saga of Adventures, Gauntlet of Spiragos, Ring of Spiragos, and Dagger of Spiragos are all available. As Dixie mentioned, we have a new novel out called Vigilant. I want
to say too that if you just want to check it out, Gauntlet of Spiragos is free, like just by itself. If you want the bundle, it's like $8. But if you just want to check out what an adventure looks like in this setting, Gauntlet of Spiragos is totally free. And then Vigilant the novel, which I really love, is available on a ton of different platforms, so we'll link those in the show notes too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've even been doing a read-along of it on the YouTube channel sporadically, yeah. So if you enjoy the sound of my voice for some reason, that's a way of accessing it.
If they don't, then they're listening to their own podcast, that's for sure.
Well, at least a third of it.
And also all of the original D20 era games and D20 era novels and anthologies are also available through DriveThru RPG. So yeah, we'll have a ton of show notes if you want to check that stuff out. And with that, is there anything else that you guys want to talk about before we wrap things up? We're in the awkward stage between Kickstarters, so...
Oh, well, in that case, yes. So for anyone who is particularly interested in seeing how Scarred Lands plays, I have started doing an actual play of it the first episode of which will be on the Onyx Path YouTube channel at roughly the same time as this podcast goes up, on the same day at least.
Nice.
The campaign is one I'm running for the Red Moon role-playing podcasters, who are fantastic players, and it's called the Great Wilhelm Heist, where our party, which is comprised of, or consists of, I should say, I think, I'm getting confused now, has within it 2 Asathi and a Slytherin who were just minding their own business at a trading post when a fire rat dragon swoops down, and the individual who was supposed to be smuggling or thieving for him, representing the local thieves guild in Zathisk, has failed and is fed to the Fire Rat Dragon, and the Fire Rat Dragon basically threatens the player characters with the same fate unless they do what he wants. So it's a rare adventure in that you get assigned an adventure by a dragon who is undoubtedly evil at the very start of the game, but don't really have much option once he's got your scent. And so they've got to make their way to the overseas fortress of Wilhelm, which it has supposedly been built to plug the dismembered lungs and stomach of Golthogger, the ancient titan of the Forge. But the theory goes, if you steal from the fortress, if you successfully breach it, then all the noxious smog that is contained within this titan's lungs will then poison the sea. So yeah, happy days, but it's going well, and the first episode will be up as of, I guess, today.
Awesome.
And if people wanted to talk to you about poison lungs, Matthew, where would they find you online?
Well, they might find me in the Heart and Lung Ward, but if not, they can find me on MatthewDawkins.com, where I invite everyone to take a look. But also you can find me on YouTube as The Gentleman Gamer. You can find me on the Onyx Path Forum as The Gentleman Gamer. I'm also on various Discords, and I'm on Twitter as Clack Click Bang.
And Dixie?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and a bunch of Discords as Dixie Cyanide, also the forum sometimes. You can also find me at my website, dixiecochran.com.
And you can find me, my personal website is eddyfate.com, EDDYFATE. That's also where you can find me on Twitter. That's also my Discord name as well, although I'm not using it as much as some people. I'm still learning how it all works. But that's also my Instagram, if you want to follow that. If you want to follow my Facebook, it's at Eddy Web Writer. And my professional stuff is at pugsteady.com. One thing we've been talking a lot about, but if you like this podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help us to let us know that you guys are liking it and to show other people that this is worth listening. And with all that, many worlds, one Pathcast.